has gotten the family a Ouija board for a present. She had played with one as a child and thought it was interesting and fun. It was Sunday evening when this took place. My mom's best friend came over to the house, and her older sister's friend was also there. The four of them were playing at the Ouija board at the dining room table, asking it various questions. Who will I marry? What will my husband look like? What kind of job might I have? Etc. The answers became very erratic. One or more of them began to think that someone might be trying to influence the board. All hands on the board were quiet and still. One of them asked, "Who is really in control of this board?" My mom's hands were on the planchette when she felt a sharp jerk. The other person's hands were barely touching it. It spelled out SATAN in very quick and deliberate motions, and then stopped. They began to argue, some saying that she pushed it, some saying she didn't. They all turned their heads toward the left from where my mom was sitting, arguing with another, when suddenly, without feeling a puff of air or anything, the candle, which was on the right of everyone, went out. It scared them so badly, so they all jumped up and ran to the porch of the church, which was across the street. It was late Sunday night after services, so the doors were locked and no one was there. They stayed there and just talked a few minutes before walking back to the house. My mom never touched a Ouija board since. I don't know. Ouija boards are super freaky to me. And while I'm sure most people when they were little probably, if you grew up in the 80s and 90s and stuff, I'm sure, like me, you were probably introduced to them at a sleepover or something. And we played them. I never had anything freaky like that happen, but I do think, people should be really careful about things like that they don't, when they don't know what they're doing. Yeah. My kids are not playing with Ouija boards. Okay, let's move on to the next one. The next freaky little story today. Okay, there's a little context to start this one. I'm 38. When I was 18, I lived in a suburb of southeast Melbourne, Australia, Noble Park. Our house was the odd one out. On a street of 70s, 80s brick homes. Ours was an Alpine-style weatherboard home with a steep roof built in the early 20th century. It was old, cold, and noisy, and you could see the ground through the gaps in the floorboards. We had a big dog who stayed outside until everyone was home, and then slept outside in a big pen doghouse at night, mostly in the summer. We also have an indoor cat. The weekend it happened, I was home alone. Dad was overseas. Mom and Sis were visiting family. What happened? Well, one night, when walking home from work, I rounded the corner and noticed a figure standing on our carport roof, looking through a window into one of the 3 upstairs bedrooms. The sun was setting, so all I could see was a dark silhouette. I had yelled at it from the top of the driveway, and it was gone. I remember thinking it odd that my dog didn't bark or notice anything. I went inside, checked the house, the dog, the windows and the doors, etc., and everything seemed in place. I assumed I had just seen a shadow from a nearby tree at sunset. The following night, I walked home from work and everything seemed normal. checked all the windows and doors, let the dog inside for the evening, and eventually put him and myself to bed. My bedroom was upstairs, down the hall from the room next to the carport roof. Before bed, I had a routine of shutting all the doors in the house as they were all squeaky, and the drafts would often blow them closed if left open. This night, I closed all doors, checked locks, turned off all the lights, and went to sleep. In the middle of the night, I was awoken by something. Not sure what, but when I came to, focused my eyes, and looked around, I saw the hallway light coming in under my door. I thought I turned it off, but perhaps I forgot. Right then, my doorknob started rattling like someone was struggling to open the door. I immediately lay back down on my side, facing the wall opposite my bed, and my heart starts beating hard. I hear the door open and close my eyes. I figured if somebody is breaking in, I'll pretend I'm asleep and maybe they'll take what they want and leave. I slowly open one eye, the one against the pillow so it's less obvious. I see the light from the hallway on my wall. My bedroom door is fully open. My heart is beating harder. I lay still. I see the digital clock on my CD player, and it's a little after 2 a.m. Then I hear the door creak again, and watch as the light on the wall slowly starts to disappear. The bedroom door is closing. At this point, I'm positive we're being robbed, but I continue to pretend I'm asleep. Keeping one eye open, everything is heightened. The loudest noise is my heartbeat, but I try to listen through it, and I can't hear anything. No breathing, no footsteps, nothing. At this point, I begin to feel pressure around both my feet. The blanket is getting tighter around them, and I realize that something is now sitting on the end of my bed. I look at the clock again, and it's now a little before 3 a.m. I'm frozen, scared. I have no idea what's happening. At some point, I have the idea to slowly readjust my position in bed and move my feet a little to see if something moves or happens. So I do this. But as I slowly readjust my feet, I feel one of them hit something solid. Something is definitely sitting on the end of my bed. The next thing I remember is hearing the first birds starting to chirp before sunrise. I look at the clock, and it's now a little before 6 a.m., and I notice the room is a little brighter. The sun is coming. Shortly after this, I feel the pressure lift from the end of the bed. I hear the bedroom door open. I see the light from the hallway on my wall again, and then the door shuts, and the sun starts to rise. I got up shortly after this and checked the whole house. All doors and windows were locked. The dog had slept through the night, and nothing from the house was missing. My cat was stuck in the bathroom overnight. He must have followed me in when I brushed my teeth without noticing. I'm not for sure what happened, but I won't forget that night in Noble Park. Yeah, that's terrifying. That's terrifying. I remember as a kid, after watching even just a scary movie or hearing a scary noise in your house, anything like that, just being paralyzed asked me to help him break into his own house. I told him it's 1 a.m. You're being weird. He asked me if he could borrow a wrench or hammer. If I don't trust him, I can use them instead, I thought. I told him, be reasonable. It's 1 a.m. Please stop acting strange. He left. And 2 days later, police surrounded his house. He had murdered his father. I reported the event to the police. The murder occurred around the reported time. They were unable to figure out if he wanted to use me as an alibi. We break in and his father's already dead. Or, if he had a fight with his dad, broke in and murdered him. 15 years later today, I saw workers cleaning that house, which reminded me of this whole story, and over the years the house was completely covered in vegetation. I wonder who owns it now. It would be weird if he did. That's not a good neighbor. That's not a good neighbor at all. And that would definitely shake me to the core, knowing that a murder happened right next to me. Okay, let's go to the next one. This one's called There Was a Stranger on the Road. This happened Wednesday of last week, October 2nd, 2024. I'm 22 and a manager of Dollar General. I just locked the doors at 10 p.m. and was beginning the usual closing tasks when I got a call from my little brother. He's 17 years old and recently has really gotten into exploring abandoned buildings and climbing large structures like radio towers. I will be honest, his new hobby does fill me with anxiety, but despite being a dumb teenager, he's still somewhat smart about his ventures, except for this time. When I answered the phone, he was asking for my help, told me he had been out exploring an abandoned house he'd come across, and he was just about to leave, but he said his car wasn't starting and the battery was dead. He also told me that he was alone. Usually he'll be with a buddy, but he's got the kind of fearlessness where he doesn't bat an eye at solo adventures. He didn't want to call our mom either because she was under the impression that he was at a friend's, but instead he was a whole county away in the middle of nowhere alone. I was pissed about his carelessness, but decided to spare the lecture until I was actually with him. I told him to send me his location, and I would be heading there soon. I got done closing around 10:30 and started speeding along the route the GPS took me. Usually I never speed, but the idea of my little brother out on some Alabama back road broken down didn't sit right with me. It took me about 40 minutes to get there. I started off on a pretty busy highway, turned off onto a very remote highway, and rode down that one for a long time. There was nothing but trees, fields, and the occasional tiny church. Eventually, I turned right down a very narrow dirt road that I nearly missed. I had to drive slow, as it was very unkept and bumpy. The tree line on each side was so thick with darkness, and to be honest, the whole vibe of the place made me really uneasy. I just had a bad feeling. I took an extremely sharp turn around a bend and saw my brother's car about 100 feet ahead. Not even 3 seconds after my headlights had shone into his car, I see him throw himself out of the car in complete hysterics. He's sprinting towards my car, screaming at the top of his process his distress, he starts shouting at me to get us out of here, and that there's someone else here. I'm an act first, ask questions later type of person, so I immediately turn us around and floor it off that road. I'd never seen him in such a panicked state before. He was sobbing, having a full-blown panic attack. I sped down the road, and by the time we made it to the main highway, he calmed down. I asked him what the F happened, or why he didn't call me, but soon realized that he had been too panicked to even think about it. He said about 20-25 minutes after he called me asking for my help, he'd been sitting in his car listening to music and just staring off, when way down the road ahead of him, a figure of a man, or human, appeared. He said he was worried at first that maybe it was a landowner coming to yell at him, but instead, the figure just stood in the middle of the road, clearly looking at him. It was too dark to make out anything about the figure other than they were clearly a person. He said the person just stood there, unmoving, for a good 3-4 minutes, before they very slowly shifted to the right, vanishing into the trees and dark. At this point, pure panic had already set in for him, because he was sure they were staring at his car, and because of the unusual behavior of the figure. He said they didn't pop out of the trees until another 5 minutes had passed, but this time, they had moved a good distance closer. He was fully freaking out now, thinking this person had to be messing with, or even worse, threatening him. He said he froze, his body not letting him do anything except stare out in terror. The figure continued to stand in the middle of the road, and then shifted back into the tree line. He said the figure did it 2 more times. Each time, they had inched a couple feet closer to his car. He said they'd been hiding in the trees for about a minute once he saw my headlights behind him. The security of knowing I was there now is what gave him the courage to leap out of the car and to make a break for it. Poor kid was so petrified he even left his phone behind in the car. We went back the next day around noon to jump the car off. My paranoid self even brought a weapon. The area was a lot less threatening in the daytime. The abandoned house could be seen through the trees to the left of the road, and to the right, a couple 100 yards behind us, was a smaller road that led to a small radio tower. Given it was bright out and my urge to know what happened, I poked around with my brother. Other than the house, thick trees along the road, and the tower, there was nothing but fields to either side of us, no sign of a barn or a farm or anything. I even looked around the ground floor of the house. My suspicion was maybe a squatter he missed in his venture was messing with him. But there was no sign of anyone actually living in the house. What unnerved me even more was the fact that around the back of the house, a good stretch of ground was littered in bones. They looked like cow vertebrae. There were hundreds of cleanly cut vertebrae everywhere. There weren't even cows in any of the fields nearby. I went back to the road and trekked ahead past his car, down to the stretch where he had said the person had been standing. It was a dirt, dusty road, so I was looking for footprints, any evidence that something was there, but there was jumped the car off. I dug into him a little bit, told him to never go exploring alone again, and then we left. I'm honestly at a loss. He's not the type of kid to make up stories like this. And also, the level of distress I saw him in, I don't think anyone could fake either. Don't go exploring abandoned things alone. That's the lesson that needed to be learned there, I think. Sadly. Okay. Now I want to talk about the legend of the Mothman. The year was 1966. Two gravediggers in Clendenin, West Virginia, saw a black figure fly over their heads while digging a grave in a cemetery. They didn't know then, but they are credited with being the first people to see the famous Mothman. According to legend, Mothman is a 10-foot creature with wings and red eyes. Shortly after the cemetery incident, residents of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, a few miles west of Clendenin, claimed they saw the monster while driving at night. Articles in newspapers at the time were reporting that the monster was also commonly seen in the TNT area near town, with some locals speculating that perhaps people were really seeing cranes or owls, and others wondering if the creature was created in some sort of mutation accident involving the chemicals associated with storing TNT. Regardless, legend has it that mysterious men in black suits had been visiting the town shortly after the sightings reports. The most infamous sighting of Mothman was on December 15th, 1967. Locals said they saw the Mothman on top of or flying over the Silver Bridge, which was a suspension bridge over the Ohio River that connected Point Pleasant, West Virginia to Ohio. According to the Mothman lore, shortly after the creature was spotted on the bridge collapsed, resulting in the deaths of 46 people. An investigation into the disaster found that a fracture in the suspension chain was the cause. Mothman has been allegedly sighted at other disastrous events since the bridge collapse, with people claiming to have seen the creature before earthquakes, tsunamis, and even the 9/11 terrorist attack. This leaves locals and storytellers split on whether Mothman should be considered an evil or benevolent creature. Some say the creature is either bad luck or causing these disasters in some way, but others speculate Mothman may be able to see into the future and that the monster appears to warn people of impending doom. That's really crazy. It's really, really spooky, actually. I mean, any sort of creature that can warn of the future, I suppose, could be helpful, but then again, I don't know, if you saw something like that, that would be a nightmare. Okay, let's do one more little. This one is gonna be about alien abduction. When numerous residents of Berkshire County, Massachusetts, individually reported having seen a UFO on September 1st, 1969, authorities were at a loss for an explanation. This wasn't a lone sighting induced by sleep deprivation that could be easily dismissed. It truly appeared as though something uncanny had occurred. On the evening in question, residents spotted lights above Sheffield and the southern Berkshires. Many of the witnesses said that the lights were fitted to an unidentified disc-shaped craft that was maneuvering in unprecedented ways. Some witnesses claimed they lost track of time as they gazed with stunned fascination at the object. Thomas Reed was 9 years old at the time, in the car with his mother, brother, and grandmother at night. The family noticed a group of glowing orbs dashed out of the roadside trees. Reed claimed that something astounding happened. Heading home, his family approached Sheffield Bridge. Quote, "It came to a stop off the right side of the road," he recalled of the glowing orbs. Everything got really calm. It was like being in the middle of a hurricane. There was like a barometric change in pressure. It was like dead silence. And then there was an eruption of crickets and frogs, and it got really loud, and that was it. Then the family suddenly found itself back in the car. They had inexplicably lost 2 hours of memory. Stranger still, Reed's mother and grandmother had somehow switched car seats. Despite any tangible evidence of the Berkshires' UFO incident, Reed has remained steadfast in his account. He said over time the family regained some memory of the incident, including having been inside a hangar-like facility with other people. Quote, "We encountered something," said Reed. "It was definitely not of this world. The hangar thing we were in was huge. It was larger than a football field. This hallway we had seen was circular, with a Y configuration, almost to control the flow of traffic. This one room had a bowed-in wall that was rounded." It's important to remember that Reed was only one of dozens of people who reported witnessing a UFO in the Sheffield area that night. Some were adults who called to the local radio station to report the sightings. Others were children who began drawing UFOs in class. There must have been 20 or 30 sketches that were drawn by children in our 4th grade class from what they saw, said Reed. They hung underneath the glass board in Sheffield Center School. More than one of those hang in the Roswell Museum today. People don't realize the significance of this, and so it wasn't just us. I don't know if any of you believe in aliens, but I'll say this. I think there's a whole lot of things we don't know. There's things we don't know we don't know. Now, here's some ASMR sound smoothie.